What's up, y'all? It's Marcus, aka EMB, and I'm back here with some more Dark Souls lore information for you guys today. Now, I've been trying to work on a timeline for the game. Ever since I did the summary, I've been trying to piece together a little timeline, but it's really difficult to make a timeline for Dark Souls because of the whole timeline is distorted thing with heroes shifting in and out, blah 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 blah. They have the whole time is hazy concept going on, so it's a little bit difficult, but this is what I've got so far. This image is available on my website, EpicNameBro, and I will keep updating it as I can, but this is my work in progress so far. So in the ancient past, we have the Age of Ancients where the dragons were alive. We know that from the intro. And we know that in the ancient past, the Lord Souls were discovered, and that was the beginning of the Age of Fire. And so, you know, the city of Anor Londo was built, and there were lots of deities and things like that, and it was kind of the golden era for Gwyn and his pantheon. The next thing we know is that about 1,000 years ago, Gwyn departed and linked the flame, and we've kind of figured that out from Frampt's dialogue saying, "It's been 1,000 years." There were a couple other sources that I can't recall off the top of my head right now, but basically about 1,000 years ago, Gwyn went and linked the flame. And around the same time, we had the fall of Izalith, when the Witch of Izalith tried to duplicate the first flame using a soul and failed. And yeah, I got a picture of Ceaseless Discharge there that's kind of not really that related, but you know, he looks really cool. Then there's kind of this unknown hazy period of Dark Souls history, maybe kind of like the Dark Ages of Dark Souls, because I don't really have a lot of solid information here. We've got the gods departing Anor Londo, and we've got the fall of New Londo, where Frampt perverted the leaders of New Londo and turned them into the Four Kings. That all happened sometime in this period in between the fall of Izalith and the linking of the flame and the fall of Ulasil, which comes later. We know that comes later. So we're not really sure about the details of this time period. The next thing that happened is that Artorias enters the Abyss. We know that happens after the fall of New Londo, but we don't know if it happened before or after the gods departed from Anor Londo. That's completely up. I don't really have much information or evidence one way or the other on that. So if anybody out there has anything, let me know. But Artorias enters the Abyss at some point, and I believe he joined the Wraiths. It's looking very, very likely that he joined the Wraiths at this point, that he defected. We'll see. But this is probably at the end of the unknown period and at the beginning of the 200 to 300 years ago period. Now, this number of 200 to 300 years ago for the fall of Ulasil, that is coming from interviews for the new content. I believe it was Uchiyama, who was, I think, publishing producer from Namco Bandai, did an interview and mentioned that it was 200, 300 years ago. Like I said, this is a work in progress, so subject to change, but about 200 to 300 years ago, Ulasil fell. I believe Artorias was involved, therefore I'm saying he entered the Abyss before that. We do know from the game that Salomon became Quelana's pupil about 200 years ago from her dialogue. Now, that brings us to kind of the big breakthrough that I had that prompted me to go ahead and make this timeline public. I believe that the major outbreak of undead took place about 100 years ago. Now, the reason for this is it's speculation. It's speculation based off of the Crestfallen Merchant's dialogue in Sin's Fortress. He says for a century they've tried and failed. Tarkus and Black Iron Tarkus and the Knights, and also Logan, Big Hat Logan. So he said for a century they've tried and failed. And this is corroborated by Rickert of Venheim, the mage blacksmith. If you talk to him, he also says that he puts Logan about 100 years back in time. He says that was a century ago. So it looks like Tarkus set out for Anor Londo about a century ago. Logan set out for Anor Londo about a century ago, and we know also that he was royalty in Vinheim until he became undead. So, about 100 years ago. And we do know that there was a massive outbreak of undead, because if you look at the description for the Baldur Gear, they say the kingdom fell to ruin after there was a big outbreak of undead. So, yeah, I think basically what we're seeing in the intro when they talk about man is seeing only endless nights, I believe this whole era started about 100 years ago. That's kind of my current idea about this. Now, if you have evidence for or against it, please let me know. I've really been scouring the game looking for accurate timeline information. It's difficult to find. It's very scarce. I feel pretty good about the 100 years number, though, because not only is it a nice round even number, but also both the Crestfallen Merchant and Rickert separately indicate that they put Logan about 100 years back in time. So, yeah. I mean, even if you say, well, the Crestfallen Merchant may not be in the same time as you, or Rickert may not be in the same time as you, that's true, but they both put about the same date. So, I think it might be accurate. And I'm going to say probably, and then this is 100% speculation, my speculation about the undead imprisoned part. I believe after the major outbreak of undead 100 years ago is when they started putting undead in the asylum. Once again, I've speculated that the Way of White, the Church of Thurland, was responsible for putting undead there. It's completely speculation, but I think it makes sense if you look at the body of lore as a whole. And then that brings us to Dark Souls, where you have the quote-unquote chosen undead. And now, while I was researching all this, I noticed some interesting things. I noticed that Frampt is actually mentioned in a number of dialogues. He is mentioned by Guinevere, for one. She talks about Kingseeker Frampt, but also Ingward. I don't recall hearing this dialogue in game, but I read it in the text dump, and I believe it's true that if you open the seal, before you beat the kings, but after you open the seal, if you go talk to Ingward, he will mention that he puts his faith in Frampt. So, I don't know. That was a really interesting little lore tidbit to me too, because what made Gwyn link the flame in the first place? What prompted him to do that? What made him think that would extend the Age of Fire? Did he think it was going to last forever? Or did he think it was just a temporary stopgap measure? They say they've been looking for a successor for him ever since he linked the flame, but what prompted him to link it in the first place? They say Frampt is a friend of King Gwyn, so that means they had contact, apparently, supposedly. So, was Frampt, is he just lying to everyone? Is he lying to Gwyn too? Or some people think he was telling the truth. Some people think that linking the flame is 100% the good ending, and it could be. It's all up to interpretation, but just some interesting things to note. I never really noticed before that Frampt and Ingward actually had contact with each other. So Anastasia also mentions Frampt, and that Frampt told her that you're going to link the flame and save all the undead. So he gets around. For a guy that has been sleeping and that can only be called out by ringing both bells of awakening, he has talked to a lot of people. Anastasia of Astora is kind of surprising, but her location maybe has something to do with it. But Ingward as well, I don't know. I'm going to play in game and try to verify that dialogue. You guys can let me know in the comments too if you've ever heard it. I realized I don't think I've heard it before, but it's in the text dump, and the text dump's pretty reliable, so yeah. But anyway, this is kind of my work in progress timeline. Like I said, it's on my website, EpicNameBro. I'm going to be changing things around and shifting it up, and hopefully adding new events, especially after the PC edition is released and we have some more information. But man, y'all, this is what I got right now. It's pretty fucking hard to put this shit together. And there's lots of little events that I just absolutely cannot place. Hazel Firefly actually had an interesting point. We know that Gwyn divided his soul up amongst his children, and we know that he gave soul shards to his followers. Hazel, I believe, was saying that his followers had special souls of their own, and his idea is that they found the souls near the first flame as well. They found separate souls, not the Lord souls, but other powerful souls. So it's really interesting. I'll put a link to his video. You can go check that out. But we know that, like, Dragon Slayer Ornstein was killing dragons, but was it before or after he received the soul from Lord Gwyn? Now, my take on it has always kind of been, well, he received power from Lord Gwyn, and then he was doing battle with the dragons. And kind of my reason for that was because it says with the souls of lords from the flame, they challenged the power of the dragons, right? So I was thinking they need to receive the power before they fought the dragons. But if it's a reward for service in battle against the dragons, then it kind of either has to come at the same time or after. So there's lots of little details like that we just absolutely cannot place, and there's valid arguments on either side. Just lots of little details to think about. Trying to put together this timeline really, once again, just kind of made me appreciate exactly how much shit is going on in one game. People talk about other games having a large body of lore, but usually when people talk about that, they're talking about a series of games that's lasted for 10 or 15 years, This is one game and has all of this information in it. And a lot of people also ask me if I want them to make Dark Souls 2 and continue this story, or a prequel or something like that. Personally, I don't. I hope we get some answers from the DLC. I hope it answers a lot of questions, but leaves a few things just for open to interpretation. And then I hope that they go to a completely new story next time, because to me, most of the fun for the story aspect of this has been just figuring it out myself. Like looking at all the item descriptions and doing research, and also hearing things that you guys think and kind of bouncing ideas off of each other and like puzzling this out. That's been a lot of the fun. So if they make another one set in the same world, we already kind of know a lot of the details. And I mean, I know they can add a lot of stuff, but anyway, I am rambling on far too long here, so I'm gonna just fucking call it here. Yeah. Peace out, guys.